Is my face too bright? Should I turn that light off? It's okay.
Perfect.
You look great, Richie. All right. Shall I admit everybody?
Yes.
Going, hi, Dina.
Hi.
Hi.
Is it live streaming, Brian?
Yep, should be. Yep. Yep, we're live.
Okay, I'll just share it onto my post. Okay. Let me put this down.
Moishi, I'm popping you on Spotlight.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another incredible YJP workshop. We are smashing them out, and tonight is a unique one because tonight is all about resilience, new beginning, and it's about getting into the zone. Now, our guest speaker tonight is a very, very, very dear friend of mine. I met Richie some 22 or 23 years ago. Now, he thinks I fell in love with him because of who he is. He's wrong. I actually fell in love with him because his mom makes
Spotlight.
Everyone, and welcome to another. I'm hearing myself double. Workshop. We are smashing them out, and tonight is a unique one because tonight
your Facebook.
Resilience, new beginning, and it's about getting into the zone. Now, our guest speaker.
Turn your volume off.
Sorry, guys, I don't know what that was all about. I was hearing myself double, and I hope I'm still not hearing myself double. As I was saying, that Richie's mom makes the most incredible and amazing schnitzel. And I was a rabbinical student in Sydney. I came from London, and I arrived in Sydney, which was the most beautiful place. I remember driving down Bondi Beach, and it was quite incredible. And one of the things we did as rabbinical students, we would work in different shuls. And I was fortunate enough to work in a shul called Southhead Synagogue. And there was a group of the most chilled and coolest group of friends I've ever met. We shared a very dear friend called Graham Eskin who introduced us. And Richie and I started hanging out, and Richie said, why don't you come over to my place? And I was sold when I tasted his mum's schnitzels. And I said, sure, I'll come here any week. So that's how we met. That was 22 or 23 years ago. And Richie was at my wedding. I even, if you could see I've got pictures of Richie at my wedding. That's the good looking guy right over there. That's me. That's Richie right over there at the wedding. That's him with his dad celebrating. We have the most extraordinary friendship. And Richie has the most extraordinary life. So we're going to get into it. You didn't come to hear me, but I just want to begin by welcoming Richie, welcoming everyone. Thank you for joining us. Richie, tell us a bit, talking about nostalgia, talking about 22, 23 years ago. Tell us a bit about where you grew up, what was life growing up in Sydney. Catch us up until we met, and then we'll go from there forward.
Sure. Thank you, Rabbi. First of all, I remember those times hanging out with you. We had the most fantastic time. I really enjoyed you coming over and spending time with my family. You did eat a lot of schnitzels, and the cholent was pretty good too. And we used to play basketball in the backyard. We had a fantastic time. So I grew up, I'm one of 9 kids. I was very fortunate to grow up in beautiful eastern suburbs of Australia. I went to yeshiva primary school. Both my parents came to Australia as migrants. And I was really fortunate to grow up with an amazing family around me, Jewish family. My father migrated to Australia from Israel, but before that from Iraq, from Baghdad, and my mother from Egypt. And they both left their original countries due to persecution in their lives. So when they came to Australia, I was surrounded by the most amazing family, my uncles, my parents, my grandparents, who, they had to make it in their lives, like a lot of our parents.
Mother from Egypt.
She was born in Alexandria in Egypt, and they all had to make it in their lives. And me growing up as a young person, I got to witness such amazing people around me and who came from such hard times. And they were my first source of inspiration, And as I said, I went to yeshiva primary school, and I was a pretty happy-go-lucky guy. I was quite entrepreneurial. I got my first job at age 11 in Grandma Moses Bakery in Rose Bay. You guys remember Cotty and Albert used to work there. I was making $7.50 an hour, and I thought I was killing it. And probably illegal today, right? And yeah, I had a very good upbringing. I went to Mariah College. I graduated from Sydney University. I did a commerce degree. I majored in accounting. And probably one of the most significant parts of my life was in 2005. My father and I just finished, I owned a backpackers hostel, which I just sold. And my father and I bought a winery in the Hunter Valley. And yeah, we were making wines at the time. So as many know, I own Harkham wines. But when we first started Harkham wines, I was 25 years old, and I kind of got dumped in the Hunter Valley away from my family. And I was trying to run all the businesses on that property. And lo and behold, I took over a German winery. It was a German winery, the German restaurant, and a pottery business. And I learned my first massive lesson in resilience there, because all of a sudden I'm on this property and I've had to run all these businesses, including a German restaurant. And it's not a very fitting job for a young Jewish boy from a religious family to run a non-kosher restaurant in the Hunter Valley, and a pottery business and a winery. And if anyone knows about making wine is extremely difficult. I mean, we rely on nature, essentially, right? Hashem will predict what kind of season that you will have. It's a variable which we can't control. And for the first 3 years, I really struggled in making wine. And I remember actually in the first year, I actually spilt 10,000 liters of wine all over the floor of the winery. The old owner was trying to teach my father and I how to take grapes out of, after you ferment, before you press, you got to shovel out the skins out of the vat. And the German owner was lighting his cigar. They used to call him Mad Max. He had a bit of a temper. And he went to light his cigar, and it wouldn't light. He started saying, Scheiße, and he stormed off, and he told me to undo the tank. And I did it too quickly. 7,000 liters of Shiraz coated the floor of the winery. And I turned to my father. I said, let's go back to Bondi now. And from 2005 to 2008, all my father would tell me was, let's make kosher wine. Let's make kosher wine. And I said, Dad, are you crazy? Do you know how hard it is to make wine, let alone kosher wine? Are you crazy? You know, it's soluble. Kosher wine is about 10 times harder than to make normal wine. And it was 2007, and my father and I were in Israel together. And not many people know this story, but we were having one of our fights that day about making kosher wine. I said, I can't even make wine, kosher wine. Leave me alone. You're crazy. And he just wouldn't let up. My father. Anyone knows my dad, he's got a very strong personality. And Moshe, you know, and that day we went to see the chief rabbi of Israel, Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu. He was a Sephardi rabbi, and I met him before. And we walked into his office, and he was dressed in this very noble gown, chief rabbi with a big hat, and he had the cape on. And he said to me, it was actually around this time of the year, and he said to me, as I walked in the room, what do you do, Richie? And I looked at him, and I looked at my father, and I said, I make wine. And he said to me, is your wine kosher? Like he knew. And I looked at my dad, I said, Dad, why would you tell him? I said, I didn't tell him anything. And he said, you know, when you make kosher wine, you're going to get blessings from every single person who makes a bracha on your wine and drinks your wine. And I bless you, you'll have one of the most successful kosher wineries in the world. And I thought I'd just start with the story of Harkham Wines. Moshe, it's a nice place to start.
Incredible. Yeah. So I'm just curious, why even before you get into the kosher, why even kosher wines? Why even wine at all?
So wine is in our heritage. So my grandmother, Aziza Harkham, my father's mother, was making wine in Zichron Yaakov in Israel. She was taking grapes, so giving her grapes from Yarden. And they used to live in temporary housing, Moabot in Zichron Yaakov. And actually the grapes were super famous because Baron Edmund de Rothschild from Chateau Lafite, one of the most famous wineries in the world, took his clippings and gave them to Israel before it became Israel. Actually in the late 1800s, and it was Yarden in Zichron Yaakov. And she used to make wine. And she always brought our family together through her cooking and through her garden. And it was kind of nice, you know, following on from something that she has done before. There's a real mystique, Rabbi, when you take something from nature and you turn it into something which people can enjoy. You know, I've worked now doing kosher wine for 12 years. I'm a winemaker, it's one of my jobs. And people have always said to me, wine is kosher, wine is kosher, wine is kosher. My take on why wine is so kosher, being amongst it, is, you know, you take something from the ground that's earthly, which is grapes. It's fruit. It has no meaning or significance. And then you take it and then you will put it into a vat. Do nothing to it. Just put the grapes into a big vat to ferment. And what happens in the fermentation process is it goes from this lowly beginning to when the kosher process begins, when you put it in that vat, when you crush it, and on its own, it will shoot up by 40%. Noises come out, gases come out, and it's the fermentation, the rising up. What is wine meant to do? It's very holy for Jewish people, but to elevate your soul. And when it goes from fruit to alcohol, I believe it's Hashem's gift to the world. We don't understand fully fermentation. Science can't fully explain what happens there. And I think that God gives us something which is lowly in the ground and which shoots up and elevates, and it becomes very spiritual for us to make brachas on and to use around all of our rituals.
I love it, Richie. I've actually got beautiful memories of drinking a glass of wine in your garden with your family at a Shabbat meal. So that's beautiful. I want to ask you specifically, before we move on into sort of your later life, back still onto the wine. Very recently, you were on TV. I saw you featured on TV about kosher wine. And I saw you struggling over there trying to explain the kosher wine. How was that experience? And just one or two maybe highlights from that episode?
Yeah, it was fantastic. You know, part of what I do in my job, I mean, fast forward from struggling to 15 years later, actually, when we did our first vintage, we got critical acclaim. Actually, our first kosher vintage got critical acclaim. And I dare to say it maybe has to do with something to do with the kosherness of it all. But since then, we have the highest rated kosher wine in Australia. We came second for our Shiraz last year. We're in all the best restaurants around Australia and around the world, including Noma from Copenhagen. Our wine can be enjoyed in Japan, New York, Hong Kong, Paris, London, and it's kosher, but it's drunk by 99.2% of people are non-Jewish people. So part of what my mission is and why I really enjoy doing that show is to destigmatize kosher. I feel like, especially with wine, kosher wine has a very bad rap in the world because of pasteurizing and making wine mavushal, right? So when you boil wine, it will kill the wine. Wine doesn't like to be interfered with. When we make wine, we actually don't add anything to the grapes. We get the best grapes possible. We take what Hashem has given us, which is perfect, and we don't want to change it too much. We're like shepherds. We don't make the wine. We help the grapes become the best grapes they can be. So teaching the Bondi Vet how to make kosher wine was fun. And it's a great experience for non-Jewish people to experience a little bit about kashrut and kosher, and to see that kosher wine can be really good as well. And any kosher product can be really good. And the Kashrut Authority of Australia, run by Rabbi Gutnick, Rabbi Groner, have been fantastic, and we love working with them.
Amazing. And just an unbashful plug for your wine. If anybody wants to buy it, you could buy it here locally in Melbourne, or I'm sure in Sydney, so don't be shy, best kosher wine. So, Rich, I want to sort of move on, and that's amazing, and it's good to sort of hear a bit of your background and how you got into winemaking and how you're still doing, you know, the best wine, and I love it. But you had arguably probably your single most, you know, life-changing moment. You know, I remember you as always a young, fit, running around, solid built, you know, guy.
Yeah.
Always. So tell us what happened. Tell us your story with your accident.
Sure. So we're going to go back to 2014. I was on top of the world. Life could not have been better. I was popular. I had great friends, great family. I was doing great in my life, in business. I almost felt at this point that I was invincible. I was 34 years old, and I woke up that morning. It was actually in between Pesach, and I was feeling a little bit off that day. And I didn't want to go to work, and I didn't want to go to do exercise you usually do. I think we've all had off days before in our life. And that evening, I had promised a friend of mine that I would have dinner with him. And because it's Pesach, we were going to go eat at his mother's place. And I didn't really want to go, but sometimes when you make commitments in life, you have to follow through with your commitments. So I thought, you know what, I'll just ride up there on my motorbike and I will come back. So I remember I was riding up Old Southhead Road in Bellevue Hill, and it was a big full moon in the sky. I remember that it was a bit of an eerie evening, and I made a right-hand turn into Victoria Road in Bellevue Hill, and I was ahead of all the traffic, and I could see up ahead on my left there was a car which was stopped. It was waiting at the brick gates in an apartment building, and the driver wasn't moving. I think he was looking the other way, which happens all the time on a motorbike. And I was thinking, has he seen me? Surely he could see my lights, hear my loud Harley Davidson. I slowed down my bike as I approached him, as we do, and he still didn't go. And then as I went to accelerate to go past him, the driver had accelerated. And he accelerated, and there was nothing I could do. I just worked out that if he touched the brakes, I'd just be able to get around him. And rather than braking, he actually pushed on the gas, and he plowed right into me, pinned my leg against his car and my motorbike. And he crushed my tibia, my fibula, my tibial plateau. Metal crushing, metal on bone will crush you. You have no chance. And I had no pain, but I just felt a breaking feeling in my body. And I remember he slammed on the brakes and he pushed my bike skidding onto the other side of the road. And in my shock, in my horror, I could see a car heading towards me. Lights were blinding me. I thought I was going to die. And as I say, my whole life flashed in front of me. And it was a crazy feeling. So you think that the thought of death or dying would be this really scary feeling, but I actually was pretty calm. And I thought, you know what? I lived a great life. It's okay. I'm ready to die. And the car missed me, veering off, missing me by inches. And then my next memory was my head smacking on the hard tarmac, my head hitting the ground first, my helmet shattering. And then the second I hit the ground, I just wanted to get out of danger's way. And then I got the worst pain of my life that I'd ever got in my life. And what did I scream out on the side of the road? Why God? Why God? Why me? Why me? Because I couldn't understand, guys, how in 1 second, Moshe, our lives can change forever. We've all kind of experienced this in our lives right now. If everyone remembers their life before the pandemic, you were going in this direction, and then COVID hit, and now we're going in this direction. But what I had to experience for the next 4 years was the worst pain and suffering I wish no one in this chat will ever experience. I had 8 operations, 7 of which had failed me. I spent 4 years in and out of hospitals. I spent hundreds of days in self-isolation, laying in a bed for more than 20 hours a day at times. I couldn't walk unassisted for over 3.5 years. I had crutches, had a walking stick. I was in a wheelchair. I couldn't even go get a drink of water on my own. If you have 2 crutches, you can't even get a drink of water for 3.5 years. And the pain, I had chronic pain so bad for 3.5 years that if I had got into my car with crutches, and I realized when I sat in the car that I left my key upstairs in my house, it would cause me to have a meltdown thinking about the anxiety from all the pain that I was going to have.
Richie,
I got a golden. Yes.
I want to pause you there for a second. You said before something quite amazing, and you said it sort of in passing. You said your life sort of flashed before your eyes, and you thought to yourself, a sense of calmness came over you, and you were like, you led a good life. Like, that seems quite extraordinary and amazing. What were the thoughts? You know, was it a split second? What were your thoughts? Were you conscious when you were taken to hospital?
Yeah, so the thoughts that came over me was all the good that I've done in the world. And it was like, it's okay. My mind just went to, you know what, if I die now, it's okay. And it just kept me calm. Yeah, I was conscious when I was taken to hospital at that point. It was one of the most difficult nights of my life. You know, I'd gone from a fully functioning person, and I knew straight away I was bleeding on the side of the road, and I knew that I wasn't going to get out of this so easy. I spent 25 minutes on the side of the road bleeding out. They thought that I had severed an artery, and they tried to, a motorbike accident is horrific by any means, all the traffic stops, and they were trying to get, you know, with some of the bystanders on the phone, triple O, and they're trying to put a wet cloth onto my leg, and I wouldn't allow them to. But going from that shock, which we're going to talk about later because we don't have a lot of time here, and I want to get into what actually helped me in this rather than what happened to me. So I just finished off a few things. So I got a golden staph infection, which turned into osteomyelitis, an infection in the bone. They were going to amputate my leg. They were talking about amputating my leg. I couldn't find a surgeon at that stage. I did a world's first operation. I injected a steroid into myself for 365 days. I did over 400 physio sessions. I stopped breathing, had post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, insomnia, depression, loneliness. So, but none of that is the point of my story. So the point of my story is what got me through this, right, Rabbi? Which is what.
100%.
I
just want to say, for the benefit of everyone, because I don't know if people will, I remember so clearly watching your Facebook post when you would, you know, talk about each day. It was like another milestone, another mission, another goal, another dream.
Yeah. So I think, you know, it's more important for me to discuss what got me through this, which is kind of what we all need in our lives right now. Because right now, as we all know, this is a time where if we're able to get through this right now, if we're able to get through our biggest struggles in our life, we have the opportunity to have a fresh start, have a new beginning. We don't grow in life in good times. We only grow from pain, suffering, and adversity. And sometimes we have to have faith that Hashem gives us the challenges that we can go through in our lives. And for me, which we'll talk about, I've taken the worst thing in my life and I made it the best thing in my life. And it starts with a choice, okay? And through my help of when I was suffering, I started to help other people that were going through big life changes or big accidents as a way that I could survive. And I started seeing patterns of events that people went through. And I came up with a concept which I want to share with you guys. As Moshe knows, now I'm a motivational speaker and I actually go into companies and organizations and community groups and I help them get through whatever they're going through by finding resilience. And I want to share a concept that I come up with you, and it's called a return on resilience. Now, resilience is about bouncing back. A return on resilience is actually about finding the opportunity in bad things that happen to you. Finding an opportunity in bad things that happen to us. So the same way, like when I do a business deal, we say, okay, what's my return on my investment? How much cash am I going to get out of an investment? So with return on resilience, we say, what's my return on my resilience? What's my ROI? What return am I going to get from all my hard work? Why waste any experience if you can get something out of it, even if it's resilience? And the same way that people talk about, they talk about making a deposit to their bank account. I speak about making a deposit to your resilience bank for a really rainy day, for a time when you really need it in your life. All right. But the first step here is not letting whatever is happening to you control you. You are not a victim. It's about abandoning victimhood. We all know some people in life. There's actually a very amazing psychologist called Caroline Meese, and she came up with a term called woundology. And woundology is people who become defined by their pain or their illness. It's always at the front of their mind. They draw power out of it. And we might know many people like this. And this is about abandoning that. So I came up with a framework, and what the framework is called, Moishi, it's called the Kadima Framework. And the Kadima Framework, Kadima, as we all know, means moving forward. Right?
A real Sharon started the Kadima party in Israel.
No, not that one, but the Kadima Framework it's an ancient Hebrew word, and it means moving forward. And I've come up with 4 steps in this framework, which we're going to go through, that if you can run through these 4 steps, you can move forward in your life, no matter what happens to you. But before we do this, I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the pandemic, right? Right now, we're all in the midst of a global pandemic, and there's no end in sight. I know a lot of you are in Victoria and you're in a hard lockdown, and my heart goes out to you. And it's normal right now. If you're feeling anxious, feeling depressed, lonely, powerless, these are all normal feelings. And I hope that this framework can help you, but you're not alone. Right now, we're in a very tough spot for us Australians. I don't know if people know the statistics. 33% of Australians right now are currently suffering from some form of anxiety or depression. Liquor sales during the pandemic increased by 42%. 28% of people are saying that they're drinking in order to cope. All right. As hard as it is to talk about, domestic violence searches on Google increased by 75%. That alone is a tragic statistic. Suicide. Already in Australia, every day, 7 or 8 people commit suicide. That number will increase by 25% during COVID because people are lonely, job loss, isolation. We've all seen the people hoarding toilet paper, medical supplies. I mean, every day in the news, there's examples of this. The anti-maskers and people who want to go out and rally during a pandemic are counted in their thousands. People are saying the whole virus is some hoax, some social enslavement thing. Conspiracy theories are everywhere. So my question is, before I get into this, is our society broken? The data suggests we're in dark and difficult times right now, and for some more than others. And we can debate for hours whether society is broken or wounded, but I have more productive questions like, how do we learn from these times right now? And how do we prepare for more uncertainty in the future? Okay. So I want to get into my Kadima framework, which I come up with, on how we could take any experience and we can move forward in our lives. Okay. So the first step of Kadima is your identity. So your identity is the perception of how that you see yourself, and it changes based on what's happening in your life. Okay. It's identity and purpose. And your identity is constantly changing based on what is happening around us. Right now, most of us, if not all of us, will be in an identity crisis, or would have been at COVID, because we're not the same people that we were before COVID. Okay. So, we've all had our identities challenged before, every single one of us. But for me, it was my accident. Before my accident, I was a healthy, successful young guy. I was on top of the world. And then boom, reality changes everything. And for some of us, maybe as children, we've had traumatic or challenging times, or, teenagers, we felt isolated. People didn't understand us. But we all have to go through several of these moments of having to reshape our identity, because sometimes, like right now, life happens to us. Okay. So for me, when I had my accident, I was really challenged. My identity was challenged. I couldn't shift my identity. I went from this healthy, fit person to being stuck in my hospital bed. I couldn't train. I couldn't be the rock that I was. I couldn't go to Harkham Wines and make wine. I couldn't climb a ladder. I wasn't the same person that I was. And when you don't have your identity, when your identity is lost, you are really challenged in your life. You go through an identity crisis. It can be really, really tough, right? And you have to start asking yourself, who am I? What can I be? Who can I be? And that's the first stage of Kadima, understanding who your new identity is right now, even if it's after loss, even if it's after isolation, trauma. And your identity is going to be closely aligned to your purpose. You know, your purpose is, what can I do? What can I contribute? Your purpose is your ability to add value to the world and to the people around you in the world. You know, and it's very important that we start asking ourselves, what is our purpose in our lives? And it's really amazing that during a crisis, we're able to find a greater meaning and a greater purpose. And that is the biggest step to finding your new identity, is actually getting a greater meaning for yourself to survive. So it's all about, to create a new identity, it's all about finding hope. We all heard of Viktor Frankl, right, Moshi?
Yeah, legendary Holocaust survivor, author of one of the best-selling books in the world.
Exactly, Man's Search for Meaning. And he talks about, in his book, he talks about prisoners who would have meaning in their lives. They could, even if it's the smallest things, they could get through anything. And those who would lose their meaning would just die, or they touch an electric fence and they would die. Okay. So he actually had this very famous quote, and he said, those that had a why can get through it, can bear any how. But if you don't have your why, you can't get through. And that's what identity is, and that's what purpose is. It's about finding a new why for yourself. Now, during this time of identity, one of the most important things is self-care. And for those of us the biggest thing is to have a very good social network around us, a support network around us. And I know, like for me, I went through a lot on my own, and I didn't have a big support network all the time, because I was in other countries having operations and suffering. And I used, you know, podcasts, I use TED Talks, you know, so it's very important to keep talking to people. And that is one of the biggest forms of resilience, is through your support network that is around you. Okay. So identity is about understanding who you are now, which is going to be linked to your purpose. But how do we do that? Which will take us to the second part of Kadima, which is integration. So integration is actually being able to integrate and accept what's happening, really being able to take it in so that you can reach acceptance. Right now, we're all grieving our old identities. It's so important that we're able to go within, stabilize, regulate, accept and adapt this new world that we are living in by dealing with our emotions. It's so important we're able to do this. And as I said, we're all grieving our old identities that we used to have before. None of us are the same people that we were before. And we're never going to be the same people. As hard as it is, this is a new world. It's a new beginning here. And I don't know if, Moshe, have you heard of someone called Dr. Kubler-Ross before?
No.
Okay, so Dr. Kubler-Ross, in her stages of grief model, I'm sure many of your listeners will probably have heard of them, and the stages are pretty predictable. So she talks about different stages of grief when we lose a loved one, but also when we make this transition from our previous identity to our new identity. And I'm going to talk you through the stages and some of the feelings that people may be feeling. So the first stage of Dr. Ross's stages of grief is denial. And you remember when someone went through anything, when the COVID first hit, we wanted to deny that anything had even happened. People were saying things like, you know what, this virus won't affect us. I'm young, I'm healthy, I'm wealthy. It won't get to Australia. And then the second stage is anger. We get angry at other people involved. You know, some people are angry at the Chinese government, some people are angry at Daniel Andrews for putting restrictions on them. Some people are angry at our government for putting restrictions on us. And then bargaining occurs. We bargain with God, and we say things like, if only we could turn back time, if only we could have a chance again, have a do-over again. You know, bargaining is things like, There'll be a vaccine by the end of the year. Australia will be done with COVID, where we'll be able to eliminate COVID when we're through with the lockdown in Melbourne. Then once we get through bargaining, we hit depression. I'm stuck. I can't get through this anymore. I don't know what to do. I'm depressed. But what we forget, guys, is that depression is the turning point to reach acceptance. We have to go through every single one of these stages in order to accept our new identity and to come out the other side. So it's so important that every time something happens to us, that we're very conscious about what stage that we are going through right now, right? And once you reach acceptance, you accept that you can't change what's happened in the past. But what you can change is the way that you deal with what's happened, which will take us to the next stage, which is inner influence. But I thought I'd just give you guys a few tools that I use in order to get through things in my life, in order to reach acceptance in my life. So for me, one of the biggest things was when I was really hurt, and it took me a long while to be able to do this, but compassion is such an important step in resilience. And we all have such strong self-talk. We expect so much of us in our lives, and we can be so harsh with ourselves. How do you speak to yourself? Kindness is key to yourself and to other people. Compassion and kindness is one of the biggest keys to being resilient. A lot of us have this idea of perfection. And when you're going through a crisis, you have to understand that we can't be perfect, but our best is good enough. Okay? Our best is just good enough. For people which are trying to control things in their life, which really want to control everything, a lot of us want to control things in our life. We have to separate what we can control and what is out of our control. And what we can control, act on, and it will empower you. But what you can't control, you have to let go of. Now, it's so important in whatever we're going through to remember to smile and laugh, because without laughter and a little bit of humor, we can't get through anything in our lives. Exercise is so important. I find whenever I'm stuck, whenever I'm feeling a little bit down, exercise for me will help me. Even in my hospital bed, as I said, I spent 20 hours a day. I would have a weight next to my bed, or I'd try to do some form of sit-ups or anything in my life. Exercise is proven to produce dopamine, serotonin, endorphins. So all those are very good tools about how you're able to get yourself out of the slump, how you're able to reach acceptance with whatever your situation is. So once you've been able to influence this, once you've been able to reach acceptance, we're able to use whatever has happened to us, the experience, whether it's failure or loss, and we use the narratives and we look for the opportunities that it affords, and we look to influence ourselves for the better, which takes to my next stage, which is inner influence, which is the third stage of Kadima. How do we dig deep and we find the strength within ourselves to overcome whatever we are feeling right now? It's about accepting we can't change the past. But as I said, it's about now, what is the opportunities that it affords, without our situation affords us? So how do we do this, guys? Well, what is it in your life that inspires you, that to push you through whatever that you need to get through in your life? So it's about changing the story, guys, being able to reframe what's happening to you, and then you try to look for the positives in whatever your situation is, because perspective is everything. I don't know if you guys know, in Chinese, when they say crisis, it means both opportunity and growth. So whenever we're in a crisis, it's our job to be able to try to find the opportunity in bad things that happen to us. And that's what inner influence is about. How do you find influence within yourself to overcome whatever you were going through, so you can recreate your story, so you can step into your authentic self and become an inspiration to other people, which is the fourth step of Kadima. But before I get into this step, I just want to tell you guys a story about what happened to me in this stage. Actually, I'll leave it. I'll wait to the end, and we'll get into it after I get through this framework. So I believe that whatever happens to us in our life, whether it's good or bad, it's our job to find some positive meaning in. Resilience is an opportunity to inspire others. And that's the way that we'll find our opportunity. In the Jewish religion, it says, if you change one person's life, it's as if you're changing the whole wide world. But in every single crisis, there are gifts, and it's our job to find those gifts. So my moment of inspiration came at a very unexpected time. I was still living with my pain, and I went to the opening of a client's restaurant. The pain was too much. I was heading home in a taxi, and my phone rings. And it was my surgeon in Germany who told me that there was a potential donor for my knee. I was 2.5 years through my journey. That morning, a young boy was sitting alongside his mother in a convertible Mercedes, stopped waiting at a traffic light. They were unaware of the horror that was about to unfold as a truck came speeding around the corner. No matter what the driver did, he plowed into the back of the car. The mother was killed instantly. The boy hit his head on the dashboard and was pronounced brain dead. And whilst in hospital, his father had this horrible decision. They were going to turn the life support system off. Do you bury your child and mourn him, or do you allow your child to have a big impact on other people's lives with becoming a donor? And I was one of those people. And I received a world first operation. I was the first person to, I don't know if you remember, Moshe, I was the first person to receive a knee transplant, a graft of a knee transplant with bone, meniscus, and cartilage. And when they transplanted this boy's live knee into me, I realized that someone had given up their life for me. And that inspired me to also want to change the world, to want to give back to this young boy. So one of the other things that I do since 2011, so since 2012, as Moshe knows, is I go to third world countries, and I'm very passionate about helping children's rights in third world countries. And in third world countries, I get a lot of perspective about how tough life can really be, right? And I'm very fortunate that, we were all very fortunate that we don't have lives like these young children. I started in Africa, and I was helping young girls, which were kind of, their parents couldn't afford to keep them and would sell them in exchange for a cow or for a dowry, which happens a lot in the third world. It's estimated that 33,000 young girls a day are forced into marriage in third world countries. And I was building a facility for these young girls in Kenya, Africa. So when I wrote a letter, when I met 7 other desperate people in my hospital bed in Germany, all who got parts from this young boy, I wanted to also make a difference and to give something back to the father. And I wrote a letter to him saying, I can never repay him or his son for what he's done. But one of the things I do is I build schools in the poorest place in the world. And I wanted to build a school in his son's honor. And I started a wine called Harkham to help me raise money for this school. He was like an angel to me. So I thought, you know what? I'll call the wine Harkham. And I built the school, and I opened the school, and I thought, wow, hold on a second here. There's an opportunity here. And that's where I got my return on my resilience. I created the Harkham Foundation, where our goal is to build 100 schools in the poorest place in the world, where the world is forgotten, where if a child is not in school, they start work from 9 years old, hard labor jobs. And we empower them and their communities to change their lives through education. And I've already built 9 schools and have 2,000 kids there. I spend 2 months there every year. And it's one of the purposes of my life is I really want to help these young kids, because there's no better feeling that you get in the world by helping someone when you can't get help back. And I take 40 Australian people with me every year. And it's a very important thing, because it's not in the news what happens to these kids, and not a lot of people know about them, right? And especially in times like this of a pandemic, it's always the most desperate and the poorest people will suffer the most. And these kids will suffer because of this. So I'm very fortunate I'm able to help them. And people often ask me also why I do that for these kids, is that despite the fact they've got no electricity, no running water, no toilets, no showers, they're so happy, humble, grateful, and kind. I'll quickly just show you guys a quick video with some of the work that we do. Okay, Moshi?
Yeah, of course, yes.
1 second. Yeah, there you go.
There's no sound. Richie, we have to show it with sound. Maybe start it again with sound.
Oh, yeah, 1 sec. I'll turn my earbuds off. Sorry, 1 second.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, let's try again.
At Archangel, our vision is to build 100 schools in places the world has forgotten. Children in these communities must walk up to 6 kilometers daily to attend school. These schools are often makeshift huts or old worn-out buildings. Classes are often done in the hot sun as there is not enough room to fit all the students. The tragedy is that whilst all of the children love learning, many poor families have no choice but to sacrifice their child's education and put them to work as young as 9 years old. Sadly, 1 in every 6 children in the world is still involved in child labor. We want to help change that for the better. Archangel's goal is to empower communities and children to change their lives through education. We are building the first 30 of these schools in Myanmar. We work with the locals and develop an ongoing relationship with the community, so we know that the school will continue to thrive long after it's built. Archangel has already built 8 schools, which has over 1,500 students. People often ask, why do we do this work? If you spend 5 minutes with these amazing children, you'll see why. Education for these children is a privilege. Despite their tough circumstances, these children and their families are incredibly grateful, happy, humble, and kind. And more than anything else, they are hungry to learn as they understand that education is their key to a better future.
Incredible.
All right, so we're actually running out of time. I got so much more to talk to you guys about, so I don't want to miss the good bits. Okay, so for me, what happened after that was I got this donor part from this young boy, and I actually just started walking for the very first time in my life again. I got back from this operation. I did some isolation time in America to recover. I did spend 6 months, and I give it every single thing that I have every time, and I never give up hope. I always push and I push and I push and I push, and I was finally better, and it was the most amazing thing. And I got back to Australia, and it was right before the Chagim in 2016, and I needed they worked out, I had a very small screw in my leg that needed to be taken out, and I had to go back to Germany again. And I didn't allow my mother to come with me. I was so fortunate. My mom came on every single trip with me, and I wouldn't allow her because of the Chagim. I literally got there on Erev Rosh Hashanah. I had an operation to take out the smallest screw. And I did the operation, and I remember I had some bad news from my doctor, and it was Yom Kippur, and I spent Yom Kippur all alone, and it was the most tragic thing, all by myself. I remember I was in my hospital, and I got this news on Yom Kippur, and it was just so fitting. It was the eve, and I remember I took two sleeping tablets and 2 painkillers right before Yom Kippur started, and I slept through Yom Kippur. I came back to Australia, and I started feeling really unwell. It was around Sukkot time, and I came back after a week in Australia. I had woken up from a really bad nightmare. I was feeling hot, and I looked down at my leg, This is after 2.5 years and 6 operations. And my leg had opened up. There was a hole in my leg now. And it started oozing. And it started oozing golden staph. And it was like the accident happened all over again. Most of the donor bits from the young boy was now killed. And my doctors were talking about a leg amputation, and the pain was so excruciating. I just could walk for the first time. Before this, I had to go back to 2 crutches and 0 weight bearing, because even touching my foot down on the ground was so excruciating. And I was switched onto a 24-hour IV antibiotics, 14,000 milligrams a day. I did it for 64 days, for 12 weeks, whatever that is. And 200 days of the most aggressive antibiotics in the world. And I hit rock bottom in my journey. And it was dark and it was depressed. And every single thing that I loved in my life that had left was now taken away from me. And I had to put my own experience to the test. I had to put my own framework to the test. And the biggest thing is, in that stage, I never gave up. Even though it was dark, even though it was tough, it was survival. I put one foot in front of the other. I just wanted to get on minute by minute, second by second, just to do the best with where I was to be able to survive. And some of the things that helped me was, daily practices of gratitude every single day. Don't look at what's bad in your life. Try to find 1 or 2 things that are good in your life. Focus on the positives. Find things that you love in your life. Even if it's drinking a cup of coffee. I couldn't do anything. And that's all that I had, was the smallest things, which helped me get through it. And, I had to live in this state for 5 months. For 5 months, I had to be in this state of -10. It was very lonely when sometimes, and I feel like a lot of us can feel like we could be very alone in times. And my mind went to very dark and horrible places, right? But I never gave up. And I had one more chance of an operation. Otherwise, it was a leg amputation. There was no more. It was my 8th and final operation. And my chances were very, very slim with my history. Maybe could be 1 in a million. And because the infection had come back again as osteomyelitis, an infection in the bone. And I remember, for me, I had a very strained relationship with Hashem. In my life, I could ask Hashem for anything in my life, and he would always come through for me. And at this stage, by this time, after almost 3 years of suffering, to go back each time, you have to understand, every operation for me, I go back to 0 again. Right? I have hope, and then your hope gets crushed. You get hope, and it's a 6-month recovery, and they're not small operations. There's drilling, there's sawing, there's hammering, there's hacking. I got to learn how to walk every single time. I got to spend 6 months, hospitals, physios. And I had my last operation, and it was a most tough operation. And I remember I was laying in my hospital, in the recovery hospital, and in walked a rabbi. I think, Moshe, you reached out to me once, right? You were amazing. You reached out to me. You were so lovely to me, always asking how I was, always caring about me. But in walked also a rabbi that I've known all my life, Rabbi Shriki. And I remember Rabbi Shriki and I, we had cried together that day. And I told him I was angry at God. And he actually spent 2 to 3 hours with me that day. And he asked if I put on tefillin again. And I said, look, I stopped putting on tefillin a few years ago. And I used to even keep Shabbat before my accident. And Shabbat was so hard for me. It was like torture for me. I would fall, I would slip, it would be dark, I couldn't walk, I'd be isolated, I wouldn't have food. And he said to me, just put on tefillin that one time. And I actually gave back into Hashem, and I cried, I put on tefillin. And guys, my dream of recovery happened. And I'm so fortunate that today I got that 1 in a million. And I'm still getting better. I was able to walk again. And today I'm doing things which I never thought that I would be able to do again, ever. And even though every single day of my life I live with pain, but I don't let that pain define the person that I am. I choose who I am. And even, before I talked about almost getting killed, you know what? It wasn't a thought of death that scared me. I got post-traumatic stress disorder about not doing the things that I really wanted to do in my life. And if I would have died, I would have lost all those things, right? And since then, I've gone about knocking off all these things off my bucket list of doing, right? Started my own charity. I love giving back, and giving back, by the way, and takes the focus off yourself. It's one of the biggest secrets to resilience. We have through my Archangel volunteers, we deliver 100 food packs every week to Care of Age, which is a Jewish charity to the elderly and the vulnerable. Since the pandemic, I'm also on the board of a charity. We feed 100 homeless people a day. When I give back, it gives my life purpose and meaning. I don't feel my pain anymore. When you give back, takes a focus of yourself. It's proven to create dopamine, serotonin. And even though I feel pain every single day of my life, right? My pain reminds me, all that it reminds me now is how much that I have made out of it. So now when I look back of my accident, it's actually worth, you know what? It's worth it. I wouldn't even change it for the world right now, because I made some goodness out of it. And it's our job right now, every single one of us, whatever we are going through, and make some goodness out of it. You know? And if there's one thing that we've learned about the future, guys, is, I mean, Rabbi, can I tell another story? We don't have enough time. You want me to tell
the story? Rich, I just want to tell you, the beautiful thing about today's event is anybody could leave when they want. So you keep going.
Okay. So I feel like I'm talking to myself here, but anyways, all right, one more story.
I'm listening. We're listening.
So that boy who gave me his leg was my inspiration, but he wasn't my only inspiration. You see, all of us, we can get inspirations from everywhere. You might even be an inspiration in someone's life and not even know that you're an inspiration. I want to introduce you to another one of my inspirations, Lucy. Now, I met Lucy in 2012 in Kenya, Africa. Now, Lucy is like a typical girl in the third world, especially in Africa. Before I met Lucy, a year before, her father couldn't afford to keep her. And like 80% of the girls in her village, Lucy was exposed to FGM, female genital mutilation. Now, Lucy, her father tried to sell her, and a year later, her mother and a teacher had saved her. And what inspired me so much about Lucy, about when I met her, was despite so much adversity that she suffered in her life, she was one of the most positive people that I had ever known at the age of 12 years old. And I was so inspired, I made a documentary called A Day in the Life of Lucy, where I followed Lucy around for a day and I got to experience her life. And her life was tough, and her whole life was for everybody else. She would wake up at 5:30 in the morning in a manyatta, a house made from cow poo where she lived, and she'd wash in a bucket because they had no running water. Then she would collect firewood for the family. Then she would make jewelry and sell the jewelry. And only the money that she got that day was the money that they had for food that night, because they lived hand to mouth living. Then she would take care of her brothers and her sisters, take care of her father who had sold her milk cows. And then she would make dinner for the family. And then at 10:30 at night, I would be exhausted. Lucy would sit in front of the fire at the age of 12 or 13 years old, and she would do her homework to try to get into high school, because that was a dream of her life, even though it was impossible. And I said to Lucy, you know what? If that's your dream, we can do it together. We can do it together. If you're strong enough, you're going to fail, you have a tough life, but you can make it. And last year, guys, I've sponsored Lucy ever since. In 2019, aged 18 or 19 years old, Lucy finally made it into high school. She achieved the dream of her life. So if Lucy's story could just teach us one thing, is perspective, which is one of the biggest other tools of resilience, by the way, is perspective. So we are living through a tough time of a pandemic. So we can't do the things that we love to do. So we can't go to synagogue on Rosh Hashanah. So we have to wear a mask. So we're in a lockdown in the confines of a house in Melbourne, and it's tough. So we have regulations. So there's increasing clusters. But if Lucy can inspire me with the opportunities that I have, what about the opportunities that we have right here on this chat right now? And if we can each just inspire each other to find some perspective that this is not the end of the world, that we will get through this. And we have the opportunity to come out stronger, to come out better, to come out with a more integrated, a better world, a more connected world, a more compassionate world. And if there's one thing that COVID has taught us is when we think about the future, we just don't know. Nobody knows. We're all trying our best to navigate through this uncertainty. And whilst we can't control every single day, what we can control, guys, is how we handle each day, how we face into the uncertainty with fortitude, with focus, and with resilience. And the Kadima framework of what I talked about will give you that opportunity to do that, okay? And we're all part of this massive social experiment. We're all learning resilience together. We're all learning how to deal with change. We're looking into a future and there's no predictable pathway right now. So you are not alone. So how do we support each other in this, guys? We have to apply Kadima. When you apply Kadima, we'll be able to create the future that we want. Moving forward, going forward with strength, with courage, with conviction, that is Kadima. Thank you.
Incredible. Really, like, if we had that, I'm giving you a standing ovation over here. Really,
Thank you.
incredible beyond incredible. And we are out of time because there is so many more questions we would have loved to ask you. And I don't mind if people do if there's a couple of questions people do want to post quickly in the chat, we could ask. Richie, did you want to show, did you want to show that final video or it's too late?
We can. It's 4 minutes long. Do you guys want to see the video of my journey? It's pretty good. You want me to show it?
Show it. Whoever
Okay.
needs to leave, no, we won't be offended.
Okay. I'll show the video. Share.
While Richie, just before Richie starts the video, in case anybody does log off, I just want to, I'll thank Richie properly in a minute, but I just want to say to everyone that there's YJP's got a lot of offering for the high holidays for Rosh Hashanah. Stay tuned. If you don't know what it is, find us on our email, on our social media, reach out to us and get involved for shopper blowing, for kits, etc. Richie, all yours.
Also, guys, if you want to connect with me, Richie Harkham on Instagram, Facebook, I have a podcast called Return on Resilience, where people take the worst thing that happened to them in their life and they've made it the best thing. But yeah, all right, here's my video and we'll speak afterwards. But without challenge and struggle in life, there is no growth. I'm Richie Harkham. I'm an entrepreneur, winemaker, and speaker. Today, I appreciate everything in my life. But 6 years ago, it was a different story. You see, I took things for granted in my life. I had it all. I was living a fast life. Worked hard and enjoyed myself. Parties, holidays, friends, and a good family. Doesn't really work. I think
it's working, Richie.
Hey?
It's working.
Oh. It's working?
It's frozen now. It was working.
Okay. Anyways, doesn't work.
Maybe we could post, if you want, if you send it to me, we could post it on the chat. On the one.
We could do it later. No worries. We'll do it later.
All right, incredible. Does anybody have? We'll take 1 or 2 questions, then we'll close it. So we'll close punctually 10 minutes late.
I'm happy to stay on and answer questions if you like. It's okay.
What's their name on the 4th step, please?
So the 4th step is inspire. I've written a 30-page white paper with neuroresilience. He's doing his PhD, a psychologist, on proving the Kadima framework, proving return on resilience. So the 4th step is inspire. So first what we have to do is we've got to work on our identity. We have to integrate what's happening. We have to find influence within ourselves to overcome whatever we go through. And then it's our job to take it from inwards to outwards, to inspire other people. That's the whole point of us being on this earth, is how can we affect other people? And once you take it off yourself and into the world, that's when you'll find your opportunity. That's when you'll get through whatever you can get through in your life, because it's no longer about you. And it shouldn't be about you. When someone's depressed, they're in their own heads. When you're not depressed, you're giving back in life. That's what life is all about.
Richie, I've got to make this mention because I just see I'm watching two screens. I'm also on the live streaming on Facebook, and I just see Robbie Gardus is watching, and that is a blast from the past also. The original crew, the original Chevra at South Head.
Big shout out to Robbie. He's been there for me the whole time. He's experienced a lot, you know. And the one other thing, Rabbi, talking about this stage work, and as Robbie knows, no recovery or no trauma is linear, guys. It's always going to be ups and downs. You know, some days are great days, some days are horrible days. It's like being in a storm of the ocean, right?
Amazing. So guys, I want to just really thank Richie. Thank you so much for giving up your time. Thank you for sharing your story. I know there's so much more. Guys, you could find Richie online. There's so much, you know, there's a lot of motivational. Brian posted a few of his videos as a lead up, but there's so much material online. There was also a Tony Robbins podcast. You could listen to him. I'm happy to post that also. Really, your inspiration, you're inspiring, you're incredible. And I love, you know, the messages of Kadima moving forward. I should tell you that in the Israeli army, Kadima is the generals lead by example. That is what it is. They say in all other armies, the generals tell the soldiers to go and they stay behind. In Israel, it's a truth. In Israel, the generals say, Kadima, follow me. And I want to tell you something, that you practice what you preach. You're a true leader and inspiration. You don't just talk the talk, but you walk the talk, literally. Every one of your steps is a real walking of the talk of your continuous inspiration. We love you. We want to wish everyone a Shana Tova, and don't just take this inspiration, but internalize it. Make it yours. You know, rediscover your identity, your purpose. You know, surround yourself by positive people. Find some great laughter. Find some great hope, and share. Give back to others, and we'll be able to implement all the lessons that we've just heard from Richie. So thank you so much. Shana Tova. Thank you for Brian for your help over there. Yeah. And as I said, always say, reach out to one another. YJP is here for all of you. Get involved, get engaged, get inspired. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Incredible.